In today's video, I'm going to walk you through how I painted this painting right here. Hi, welcome to Paint Coach. I am Chris Fornatero here to help simplify oil painting so you can get better faster. All right, before we jump into the video, please, if you like this video, if you like this channel, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow. I greatly appreciate it. So I feel a lot of beginners would look at this painting and find it very intimidating. You know, all the reflections, changes of color, this and that. Now, the story behind this painting actually comes from a Patreon student of mine. He said that he saw a painting that had a knight's helmet and he just looked at it and said, how would you paint that? He had no idea how anybody would go about painting that. So I painted it for him. And I've heard things like this before from other students. They see a subject that seems very difficult for them and very complicated. And I feel like a lot of people think there's specific ways to go about painting specific things. And there's definitely certain little things that help you paint certain things, you know, little tricks to help you paint landscapes, little tricks to help you paint portraits, you know, specific things that help you know what to do specifically to that subject. But really, painting is painting, and I don't care what you're painting, if you're painting a landscape or if you're painting a bowl of fruit or if you're painting a knight's helmet. It comes down to simplifying it and breaking it down into its simple shapes and values. And now certain things that seem really complicated or hard to paint are hard because it requires more of that skill set of simplifying a subject, to really not get caught up in the detail too quickly, to take it one shape at a time and to build the painting. So just keep that in mind as we go through this painting. All right, now my colors for this painting are ivory black, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, cadmium lemon, and titanium white. And I'm using linseed oil as my medium, and I'm painting on a Cerulean acrylic prime linen panel. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is put a wash of yellow ochre and ivory black all over the canvas. I'm going to get rid of this stark white canvas because that is just no fun to start out painting on. And I put this wash on with a lot of paint thinner and I wipe it with a paper towel to get any excess off. And you don't really have to wait for this to dry. You can go and start drawing on it right away. And I'm going to be using more ivory black to just loosely sketch in the helmet. Now when I'm sketching the helmet, I'm being loose, but I'm being accurate. I'm not worried about getting into all these little details. Like, I want to get the basic shapes and angles and form correct. Now, as I'm drawing, you'll notice that I'm using straight lines opposed to any curved lines. And this is because using straight lines makes it easier to get the correct shape. Because right now you're just thinking about big shapes, the angles, and getting everything in there correct. And when you try and draw curved lines, it's a lot harder to accurately draw in a curved line opposed to a straight line. All right, so I'm gonna grab a big brush now and I'm gonna look at my reference photo and I'm gonna squint my eyes, and whatever I see, I'm gonna paint. If I don't see it in my reference photo when I'm squinting my eyes, I'm not gonna paint it. See, when you squint your eyes, it gets rid of detail, it gets rid of, you know, a lot. It really simplifies everything into its basic light and dark values. And that's all I'm worrying about right now. And I'm gonna be painting this in with thin paint because this is my first layer of paint and I'm gonna be able to build on top of that. And now I'm gonna start with my darkest values. I'm gonna squint my eyes, look at my reference photo, and just identify all the darkest areas of the painting, and I'm gonna block those in. And now I'm blocking them pretty loosely, and I'm not worrying about overpainting or painting outside the lines into areas that aren't dark because I know I'm gonna be able to push back with the lights. I'm always talking about pushing and pulling the paint. This is an example of that. I'm laying in the darks, knowing it's okay if I lay in too many darks because I can push back with the lights. Now, after I get my darks in, I'm gonna do the exact same thing, but with whatever I see as the next lightest value. I'm gonna be real loose and I'm just gonna block in what I see when I'm squinting my eyes. Now, I'm gonna repeat this process until I have the entire helmet covered with thin paint. Now, if you look at my palette, you'll see that I have two major pools of color working right now. I have like this goldish color and this grayish silver color. And those are my two main pools of paint, and I'm making colors branching off of those. This kind of helps me keep my colors and values organized on my palette. All right, now that we have all these darks laid in with thin paint, now we can move to the lighter values. And since we're gonna be painting over top of this dark paint, we're also gonna want our paint to get a little thicker. So we're not gonna be using any more paint thinner with our paint. We're gonna move to medium. Now we're not gonna use a lot of medium. The biggest mistake I see people do is they use too much medium. You want just enough to get the paint moving how you want it to move. And since this paint's gonna be thicker, it's gonna be able to lay over those darks nice and easily. Now don't jump to your brightest highlights just yet. We'll work to that. Start with your darkest light values and go from there. And as far as this whole paint thinner medium thing, don't get too bogged down in that. Don't overthink it. You know, as I'm painting, like I still might use a little bit of paint thinner. You know, I might dip it a little bit in the paint thinner and a little bit in the medium. You're gonna have to feel it out. So just in general, adhere to, you know, working thin to thick, but don't ever catch yourself trying to be formulaic with, you know, using paint thinner, then medium, then no medium. You're just gonna have to feel it out. Now remember when I said don't worry about overpainting your darks? This is why. Because now that we have this thicker, lighter paint, we can go over it easily. And if we didn't push the darks enough, we would have to go back with our darks and fill in the areas that we didn't go far enough. Which is fine, it's just a lot easier to overdo your darks and then push back with the lights than having to underdo your darks, go in with lights, then come back with darks. Now for me, this is the most fun part of the painting. This is where the form and the shape and everything is gonna start coming into focus. And as I'm painting and making my brush strokes, you'll see me moving my brush and painting in strokes at all different angles. And a way to think about your brushwork is think about as if you're wrapping the paint around your subject, as if the paint is like a paper mache and you're just wrapping it around almost like a sculpture. I found that thinking about brushwork that way really helps you define the form of what you're painting. Now when it comes to the very brightest highlights, be careful and don't use pure white if it's not calling for it. A lot of people see these bright highlights and they think that the only way to get to it is to jump to pure white, and a lot of times you don't. Like here, I'm not using pure white. I'm using a bright yellow, but since I laid in my darks dark enough, when I put in that bright yellow, it's gonna seem really bright like a highlight because it's surrounded by all these darks. And I'm still staying very broad in general with my brush work. I haven't gotten into any detail yet. So now that we have darks, we got highlights, we got midtones, we have all these different values on the canvas, we can start making some decisions and start comparing values, comparing colors, and start pushing and pulling things as we see fit. This is why I like to move around different areas of the painting as I'm working and build it all up together instead of finishing one section then moving on to another section. This is where you'll be bouncing back and forth from darks to lights, adjusting things as you see fit. Look for value and color comparisons. Be thinking about things like, is this color darker or lighter than this other color? If so, how much darker or lighter is it? This would also be a great time to take a picture of your painting and put it in black and white, and also put your reference photo in black and white just to compare the values and make sure everything is working in the right value zone. Taking away the color and just seeing it in black and white will really help you do this. Now, as you're making all these adjustments, you're gonna be slowly using thicker and thicker paint. But remember, certain areas on your canvas, the paint is thicker than others. Like all those darks we laid in earlier are relatively thin, so you won't have to make the paint that much thicker to paint over top of those. But if you're trying to paint over the highlights, you're probably gonna want the paint to get a little thicker. And you can do this by not using as much medium and just moving more towards straight paint. And again, there's no recipe or science for this. You're gonna have to feel it out. But just be aware different areas are gonna require different thicknesses of paint for you to build over top of it. And like I said earlier, you're really just gonna have to feel it out. So once everything is well developed to where I like it, I can now go in and put in some detail like the ridges and edges on certain parts of the helmet. Now, as I was doing this, I noticed a big drawing mistake that I had made. In the nose area of the helmet, the spacing wasn't correct and I wanted to redo it. If this happens to you, if you notice something way down the line once you've laid down a lot of thick paint on your painting that you really want to adjust something, just take a palette knife or a paper towel and scrape off the paint in the section that you want to repaint. If you try to paint over this thick paint, it's going to be really difficult. You're much better off just scraping it off and starting straight back onto the canvas. Don't be afraid to do this. I know you spend a lot of time developing and painting and getting these right colors and values and everything, but if it's not drawn right, if you see a mistake, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet, scrape it down, wipe it down, and start that section over. We're not here to make okay paintings, we're here to make great paintings, and this is the only way you're going to be able to do that. Now, as I'm working the detail, I'm not getting caught up in every single little detail. I'm still squinting my eyes down a little bit and getting rid of the very, very, very fine detail and just seeing what I see when I slightly squint my eyes. Now, this may not be what you want to do. You might want to actually get in there and do every single little thing that you see. I personally just like this very simple approach to detail. I tend to like to just suggest detail. And for the finest detail, I like to use my ivory rigger brush. And there you go. I hope breaking this painting down this way simplified it for you and made it not as intimidating. I hope that you can see that the process of painting, for one thing, is pretty much the same for anything else. No matter how complicated it is, just remember, squint down, see the simple shapes, start with the big shapes, work to the small shapes. Now, if you want to see the full real-time video painting tutorial of this helmet, you can see that on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description below. Also below, I have links to all the materials I suggest for beginners if you don't know what materials you should be practicing with. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I am Chris Fornatero here telling you to go get painting. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button. I also offer you this video and this video. They both will change your life forever. Just pick one. You can't go wrong.